Today, I am going to continue on the second chapter of the book Delog, Reflections in a Crystal Mirror. And where I left off before, she had another meeting, or I guess you would say a meeting of Yama. And this was even more terrifying than the first time she met him. And she said, quote, although many horrifying things happened to me, through my supplication to the venerable goddess, I was able to take a firm stand without fear, end quote. And the venerable goddess, of course, is White Tara. And the horrifying things was what she experienced or saw with this vision or experience of Yama, described as this way: a man's body, a head of a red bull, biting fangs, hands that reached out to clutch, piercing iron horns, staring eyes, tongues of fire, terrifying bellows of laughter, and so forth. So one of the things that White Tara does is she protects from fear. And of course, White Tara has been escorting her through this experience of both the Pure Lands and the 6 realms of samsara. And I would say this, that this is a lesson, and that is, instead of worrying about bad things that could happen to you, say Tara's mantra for protection. Supplicate her for protection instead of worrying. Do something, in other words, instead of being overcome with worry and so forth. Be mindful, recognize when fear is arising, and supplicate Tara, say her mantra, and so forth, rather than wait till it overwhelms you and then you become almost helpless because it is so strong and overwhelming. So the scene after that is, and this is a common scene, by the way, and that is these great beings. In this case, it's a yogin leading beings that they have a connection with, and sometimes even beings they don't have a connection with, out of these lower realms to a pure land. So here we have a yogin, which is a male yogi, that he's leading beings out of hell to Chenrezi's Potala mountain, his pure realm. And in this case, he's leading only those who have shared food with him in one way or another. And as I said, it's easiest to, if you're a bodhisattva leading beings out of these lower realms, if you have a connection with them in some way. And in this case, it would offering him food, sharing food in some way or another. Tara says, quote, if there is no connection, you cannot lead. And of course, the point here is that while you're alive, now is the time to make a connection with as many great masters as you can, because they can lead you out of these lower realms if you happen to get, you might say, stuck in there because of your negative deeds. And here's an observation of mine, and that is that these hell beings and preta beings are victims, that it is others that are causing their pain and suffering. And they are powerless to stop it. They don't have control. to stop their pain and suffering. This is how all of this appears to them. And this kind of mentality in our present life can also get us, you might say, stuck in our next life, our future life. And so while we are alive, we want to realize that we do have the power to at least train and try to work with our thoughts, our attachment, our anger, and so forth. And instead of blaming others for our problems, accept them as our problems and workable in some way or another. And this is the way we go beyond this victim mentality of just seeing all our problems and our suffering and our pain and so forth as the result of other people and having nothing to do with us, that we are, you might say, innocent bystanders. And this is a very common approach today, being a victim and just feeling that other people are causing all of my problems. If there weren't for other people, I'd have no problems. So what we see is our own projections, and both samsara and pure realms are a matter of your projections, how you see it. A pure realm is seen purely, unaltered, and the realms of samsara are just projecting onto these pure realms. Whether it is samsara or a pure realm, both are experienced as dreamlike. And Dawa Drolma, her experience is dreamlike. If you pay attention to how she is describing these things, beings come and go, scenes arise, and then they disappear, and then they're replaced by another. But it's very much like a dream, or perhaps a stream of consciousness movie. And her experience alternates between seeing beings that are experiencing tremendous suffering in the various different hell realms and the hungry ghost realm, and then bodhisattvas leading beings out to pure lands. In another scene, in my edition of the book, this is on page 66. And I have the first edition. I think most of you have a newer edition, but he says, quote, he's quoting, she is quoting Yama. And he says, quote, if there is Dharma in them, I am the king of Dharma. But if there is not, I am the king of their harmful actions. And that is what I am trying to explain here, how it depends on how we project. So in this almost endless series of scenes of people being in extremely painful situations, there's always an explanation of what negative actions is the cause of that. Sometimes it's the person suffering themselves. Sometimes it's one of the minions. Sometimes it's Tara. Sometimes it's Yama. But there's always an explanation. And then the same thing for bodhisattvas. There's always an explanation of who they are, what they have done, and so forth. Now, in a previous book class, we studied the book Karma by Delog Rinpoche. And I do want to point this out, that he felt that karma is a collection, and it is usually not as simple as is being presented in this book, that it's a combination of various different things, that we are karma carriers and have a tremendous amount of negative karma accumulated and a tremendous amount of positive karma or merit that we have accumulated. And so what we experience is usually a mixture of positive karma and negative karma. So there are many causes and many subtle results. I'm going to take a slight, you might say, break here and show you a picture. I went to the internet, looked up Awa, because I wasn't sure who Awa is. This is a statue that is in Taiwan, but you can see the bull head with a sort of trident. He's got a chain in one hand, the trident, then the other, and then the horns of a bull sticking out on each side. And so this is an actual statue of Awa. And you probably would not want to meet him. So I thought I would share that with you. So another being that appears is a nun named Zangmo, and she is leading 3,000 beings connected to her by either positive karma or negative karma. And she requests Yama to grant his blessings. And he offers some advice. And he then does homage to her. And so this is in stark contrast to him being wrathful and punishing. She requests her to grant blessings, that the suffering of the lower realms be pacified, that the beings there enter the path of liberation, be reborn in Shenrezi's pure realm, and that the two benefits be spontaneously accomplished. And the two benefits are the benefit of yourself, and then the benefit of others, that as you attain realization, these both spontaneously manifest. Yama also says that by repeating these words of the nun daily will lead to the rebirth in a pure realm of Guru Rinpoche, the copper-colored mountain. So again, there's a lot more in this chapter than just the suffering of the various realms and what leads you there. There are lots of teachings here about how to avoid this and so forth. Another encounter is with military people and people who repair or make weapons, bad llamas, people who kill animals, even lice. And what came to my mind is these Asian beetles that we have here, that we really have to be careful about how we treat even insects. So the point is to be aware of a very long list of actions of body, speech, and mind that can lead to the lower realms, and avoid these actions and engage in their opposite, what is good, to be aware of what is virtuous behavior and actions of body, speech, and mind. And over again, it is brought up, say the Mani mantra as much as you can, Om Mani Padme Hum, and the Guru Rinpoche mantra and Tara mantra. There's a whole list of things here at the end that really kind of capture what is important in this chapter. And the next point is that make offerings to the three jewels. That by making offerings to the three jewels, you will become richer and not poorer. And engage in generosity to beggars, the blind, to dogs, to any beings beneath you. Both are important. We offer to those beings that are above us, and we engage in generosity to those beings that are below us. And needless to say, right now, there's a tremendous opportunity to both make offerings and to engage in generosity to people that are below us, because due to COVID, there's even more poverty, hunger, lack of good medical care, and so on and so forth in the world. And there's no end to worthy recipients of generosity. The next bit of advice is to be good to other family members. Don't fight within the family. And of course, families can be very difficult to be with and get along. And here is my advice: is sometimes just don't spend, if you have a difficult family where there's a lot of dissension and so forth, that spend short periods of time with your family. Don't be with your family so long that it causes you to lose your mindfulness and get angry or engage in a lot of harmful activity. Better to be with a family for a short time and avoid going there than it is to spend a lot of time with family. That you're not benefiting anybody if you're losing your self-control and engaging in negative behavior. So do what you can with family members, but don't hesitate to realize that you've reached your limit and to at least keep your mouth shut, if not leave. But of course, even if you leave, it can be done in a respectful way, saying that really, I think it's better that I leave right now. Treat parents with respect and use gentle voices and words. Yama says that you are repaying a debt of kindness to your parents. And quote, there is no more sublime form of spirituality than that. It might take a lot of contemplation and meditation and so forth to come to this point. But the very fact that you have a body, and your body is probably your most precious possession, it is a result of your parents. So it's good to meditate on this and contemplate this, that regardless of what happened after you were born, that up until that time, all of this was a result totally of your mother. And regardless of how you were treated from there until adulthood, you did survive to adulthood, and you're still alive now. So instead of you might say, going over and over and over again, things that upset you about your family and your mother in particular. Try to look on the positive things that you have gained from your parents and your mother in particular, and your family in general. And then he says, assist older people who come on pilgrimage. Now, for us, people aren't going to be coming to Wisconsin or the Twin Cities on pilgrimage, most likely. But if you can assist, things that we can do too is there are organizations that support nuns and monks, monasteries and nunneries over in Asia, and we can donate money to these groups. And there are many other groups over in Asia that we can support in one way or another with donations. Then he says, have faith in the lamas and establish a spiritual connection with them. Again, this is very important. Make offerings, attend teachings, and make aspirations. And assist in Lama visits. I can tell you for sure that when we have Lamas visiting here, a lot of assistance is both needed and appreciated. And there's a lot of merit from assisting in that and also serving the Lama. That goes back to a little bit earlier when talking about this one bodhisattva who was freeing anyone in hell that had shared food with him. And then contemplate your virtuous actions. A lot of times people think that if we contemplate our virtuous actions, we're just getting into egotism. But no, it's not. Contemplate your virtuous actions as well, of course, as your non-virtuous actions. The non-virtuous actions we confess and purify. Our virtuous actions, then we dedicate the merit of having done those things. If we just concentrate on our non-virtuous actions, we can get kind of depressed and think that all we are is a bunch of non-virtuous actions. And in actuality, who we are has nothing to do with our actions, virtuous or non-virtuous. It really has to do with our Buddha nature and primordial wisdom. But if we just concentrate on all the negative things we have done, we can get very depressed and one-sided and down on ourselves. And we don't need to do that. It's a dead end. And it keeps you stuck. Then he says, don't practice Dharma by tainted negative actions. Don't taint your Dharma practice with negative actions. So try to practice as purely as you can. And again, don't get too down on yourself when you're not able to practice as purely and as well as you would like to. Just, it's a workable situation. And then he says, to avoid non-virtuous actions. Another one was don't be aloof, and I equate that with arrogance. Don't put yourself above other people. And then don't doubt the Dharma. Supplicate the three jewels over and over again. It's fine to question the Dharma, but doubt is very different in terms of the result that it has on you. If you doubt the Dharma, then you are going to doubt the effectiveness of Dharma, and it's not going to be effective. Doubt doesn't work in the material world. If you doubt something is going to work, you're not going to try it. And it's the same way in the practice of Dharma. If we doubt the effectiveness of the practices that our teachers have given us, then even if we do try it, there won't be much of an effect. So we need to recognize doubt when it arises, work with it, and the best that we can, place it aside. And if nothing else, at least talk to your teacher or teachers about the doubt that you are having. My advice is to, if you are wondering about something, just hold it aside and say, I don't understand this. I'm not going to come to a conclusion one way or another. And maybe in the future, I will have a better understanding and this will make more sense. And then, of course, if necessary, talk to a lama, have an interview or about whatever it is that you don't understand. Next, he mentions 3 ways to face death. And the best way is to cultivate supreme confidence and be joyful at the time of death. To rest in faith, confidence, and practice. Again, this cuts through doubt. Just have this faith, confidence, and practice them as much as you can up until the time of death. The next level, below that, is to be without fear and be unashamed of yourself. Again, remember that you have Buddha nature. And the third, or the least level, is to at least have no regrets. If at all possible, confess and purify everything that you can think of and everything that you can't even think of, that you're not aware of, that things you've done in this life and an endless series of past lives. Confess it all and then have no regrets. So even if you have not done a lot of practice, at least if you can die with no regrets, that can be of great benefit. He talks about Dharma commitments and Samaya commitments. And I don't want to talk too much about this. These Samaya commitments are really for advanced practitioners. And the lamas are generally careful that you don't get involved unknowingly in these Samaya commitments, because if a student can't keep their Samaya, it has a negative impact on the Lama. But the main Samaya commitment is to what's called not abandon sentient beings. And that means to feel, I am not going to help this particular being, no matter what. It isn't, I'm not going to help all sentient beings. It's just giving up on one particular sentient being. And that's very easy to do. Thinking that one is particularly negative, difficult, perhaps your enemy, and so forth. And but that kind of sums up all of the Samaya, all that you need to know at this time. Another way to look at it is willfully going against the instructions of the Lama. So that is willfully, not doing it in ignorance, but purposely going against the instructions of the Lama. Another is causing disharmony in the Sangha. Another one is abandoning the Dharma, just dropping it and leaving it. And the reason why that is so serious is that karma cannot be purified because the individual has no objects to confess to. They've abandoned them. So even if they wanted to confess, they've abandoned these objects to confess to, and there's no confession and purification possible. And these things all creating disharmony, abandoning Dharma, going against the wishes of the Lama willfully, all of these bring others down too, can cause a lot of problems in the Sangha. And therefore, you want to avoid all of these. So we need to be devoted to the Lama. In our tradition, that is the Karmapa. So what devotion means is to view Karmapa as a living Buddha. And if we can do that, there's no problem. So that kind of sums up Samaya. If you can view Karmapa, Gyalwang Karmapa, as a living Buddha and follow his instructions, have faith and confidence in him, no problem. Now, there are instructions here about the lamas, and I'm not going to go into that, but needless to say, it caught my attention. But since none of you are lamas, in a way, it doesn't matter, but it does show you that being a lama has its own problems if you're not a good lama. And finally, the last instructions he gives, I'm going to go over briefly. In my book, it starts on page 93. And Yama tells Dawa Drolma to bring these instructions back to the lamas. And these are really instructions, you could say they are Dzogchen instructions or Mahamudra instructions. Dzogchen are these instructions in the Nyingma lineage about the ultimate nature of mind, and they're called Mahamudra in the Kagyu lineage. So the ultimate view is the fundamental nature of reality is free of elaboration. And he says, be like space without extremes. And that is, this is what is also called the middle way, which is the Galupa name for these ultimate teachings. Middle way being without extreme in this way and extreme of that way. Theism and hedonism. With hedonism, it doesn't matter what I do. There's no such thing as karma. I don't have to be responsible. And theism is that there is a higher being that determines and controls everything. The middle way is everything between those two extremes. He talks about the development and completion stages leading to lucidity. And the development stage is in a Vajrayana practice, and it is everything from the beginning of the practice up through the dissolution of the visualization at some point after the mantra repetition. That's the development stage. The completion stage is what happens when the visualization is dissolved and you rest in non-thought for a moment or two. But by practicing the development and completion stages, that leads to lucidity and recognition of the ultimate. And be unwavering like a mountain. So be firm and try to have your concentration unwavering, and be like an ocean. avoid accepting and rejecting, just experience. And then to be like a father or a mother without judgment, a father or mother towards other beings without judgments based on how close they are or how distant they are. In other words, aversion and attachment. And be extremely kind. And when I read that, I immediately thought of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche because he was just so kind. He gave instructions for monks, nuns, and consorts. None of you fall in those categories, so I'm just going to go past that. Then there was a message for men. And so his advice for men is that men commit a lot of black and white actions, study, contemplate, and practice, meet and follow the Lama's directions. And by doing this, you will avoid a lot of suffering after death. For women, he said, be kind to your parents, avoid causing domestic discord and violence. And that kind of jumped out at me because in our culture, domestic violence is usually associated with a man assaulting a female partner. It can go the other way too. I think what they're meaning here is just arguing and a lot of division. Remember that in tents, that a lot of the Tibetans lived in tents much, if not all of the year. And therefore, because they had at least 3 generations, sometimes it could get to be a lot of arguing and bickering and so forth. And that we need to avoid that. So to continue with his advice for women is pursue virtue as much as possible and act benevolently towards all. And then finally, his advice to worldly folks is to contemplate precious human birth, that we are very fortunate to have been born in a human body and to have come in contact with Buddhism and to have many other favorable factors in our lives, and then take advantage of that precious human birth. And then the advice after that is very much the way Tibetan lay people would practice, and that is they would say the Mani mantra, Alat Tara's mantra, the Guru Rinpoche mantra, engage in virtue and avoid non-virtue, increase your compassion, take refuge in the 3 jewels, and pray. Use prayer wheels. Satsas there are molds, and then you would pour in this country, we would use clay, and then bake it, and then paint up the satsas. And it's very virtuous activity. Hang prayer flags. Ransom beings means to buy beings that are destined to be killed, and then release them. In Tibet, it was common to buy a yak or another domestic animal and then put some red paint on the animal, indicating that it was not to be killed, and then release it. Can't do that in this country, but that was a very common practice back in Tibet. When I was in Taiwan, they had what they would do there. If this one organization actually had some land, and they had a pond on that land, And they would go to the market and buy ducks and geese and then release them on that land. There was another piece of land where they would release cattle on, and so on and so forth, and then take care of these animals until they died a natural death. And there are refuges in this country that will do that. And so it's good to, for instance, offer money to an organization like that to allow these animals to live a long life and die naturally. And finally, after this, she sees a procession going to a pure realm, and it's a large procession, and they are doing all of these activities on their way. And then she finishes up by talking a little bit about her motivation. The question is, how do you taint the Dharma with negative views and other types of things? And one way would be to practice in a group in such a way that you're trying to impress people with what a good practitioner you are, or make an offering and make a big deal out of it, or just any kind of egotistical motivation that that we can come up with for doing the Dharma. The question is, can't we just help beings because they are suffering? This sounds a bit like a transactional operation here if we are wanting to relieve their suffering because they did something nice for us in the past, perhaps a past life. To a certain extent, I have heard this also said, that every sentient being has been a father to us, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter, and so on, grandparents, that this is because of interdependence and an endless series of previous lives. We are very intimately related to everybody. However, if you want to just say that person is suffering and you want to work at it at that level, if that works for you, then I would say do that. But it is important. Lama Karma said this one time, that the Tibetans treat their mother almost like a goddess, that hold the mother up in a very, very, very high place. And I think that's where this is coming from. Here in the West, for whatever reason, we tend to, nowadays at least, blame our mother for the problems, the problems that we've had. And it's very common. It's very easy to fall down that rabbit hole. And I have been in that place myself much of my life. And I will say this, that being able to work with that and get beyond that was very beneficial in the long run. But I started with my grandmother, thinking about how nice my grandmother had been to me and how much she suffered, and I wanted to relieve her suffering. And when it got down to where you placed an enemy in front of you, and that was my mother, and the bottom line is, what works to develop compassion? The question is that in a past life, I may have been a woman, I may have been a mother, that we don't know. And in the future, I could be a woman again. This question was asked by a man. And that this seems very cultural, related to the Tibetan culture and the way they looked at mothers and so forth. And he didn't quite say it this way, but I think he also mentioned then meant that it feels a little artificial to be just placing the mother there as the object of compassion rather than the suffering. And so going back to this is inherent in the Tonglen practice of taking and sending. Traditionally, it is you would start with your mother because you had a lot of compassion for your mother, more for your mother than perhaps your father, than perhaps a brother or a sister or somebody else in the tent or in the village where your tent is. In the West, now, teachers have said, because you want to start out with Tonglen with a being that you have a lot of compassion for already and build on that. And so teachers, Tibetan teachers have said in the West, maybe you have to start with a pet puppy. Maybe you have to start with somebody that you're not related to. In other words, you start with somebody that you feel a lot of compassion for and want to reduce their suffering. Whatever is the easiest, that's where you want to go. And then gradually work out to people that you have less compassion for and try to strengthen that. And then eventually strangers, and then eventually you would place an enemy in front and work with removing that enemy's suffering. So the important part is to use this to develop your own compassion and then spread it out to a wider group of beings. My own experience has been with Western students, and that's almost all the people that I work with as a student teacher, is that we don't even have compassion for ourselves. A lot of Westerners hate themselves, feel that they are lacking, are continually failing, are riddled with guilt, self-loathing, and so forth. And I frequently recommend starting with yourself. If you can't have compassion for yourself, even, you don't know how to have compassion for another being. And so it depends on where you are, who your teacher is, how you do this.